So this is going to show you where you can download your Python. Just follow this download here, get the Python. 3.12 is already out. Yeah, 3.12 is already out. But if you have any version you are able to download, the one that is compatible with your system, then. And again, if you want to download this and your system is 64-bit processor, make sure you are downloading the one that is for 64-bit processor. If your system is 32, make sure you are downloading that one so that you will have a compatible software to run your program. So when you are done with that, I think that is all we need to do about getting started with the installation that we need to. Let's open a Visual Studio Code. This is a Visual Studio Code. I know most of all of us knows what Visual Studio Code is. So we just create a Python file from here. You can create a new file. You can decide to open a file if you already have one. You can decide to open a folder if you already have one created. Just open it and navigate to the directory where it is and get it opened. But in this particular place, we are going to be working on new file. So I'm creating a new file. Once I click on this new file, I'm getting a response here, a drop down here that is showing me the type of file I want to get. So I will just click on Python file. So remember that your Python code is not going to run if you don't have some of these extensions. There are some extensions that are necessary for you to run your Python code. For example, the debug extension. If you just get to this place, Python debugger is necessary for you to run a Python code on your VS Code. Just get your extensions here and you get this. I've already installed this, that is why it's here. So the one that is from Microsoft, so that is the one we are going to download. It is highly recommended that you download the one that is from Microsoft. If you download this, you can be able to run your Python without having any issue. Okay, if you want to save your Python file, if you want to save your Python file, because this particular file is not saved yet. For example, if you want to save it, make sure that you have an extension that you save the Python file from. I hope my screen is visible and is bold enough. Let me try to increase this a
Yeah,
little.
it's visible.
Okay,
Yeah, it's okay that way.
okay, it's okay like this. So to save your Python file, use a Python extension to save it, and that is .py extension. .py. As you're saving your file, make sure that it ends with .py. But already, we already have a Python file here. They already selected this Python here from the selection when we wanted to create the file. So in Visual Studio Code, you might not need to enter the .py again, but to ensure that you do not fall into error, just save it with .py. Use Ctrl S. It's already a Python type here because we selected it there, which means you can just enter any name here. Let me just call this. Let me call it our department CSC. Okay. Let me just call it our department CSC 211. Okay. So if you don't have, if this is not from VS Code or that you have not selected that Python file drop down that came up there, make sure that you include .py at the end of this file. So that is how you can save your file. Then the next thing we are going to do now is the very basic thing that we expected to do as starting uh, with our IDE. IDE is a integrated development environment. That is just the full meaning. And VS Code is an IDE. The first basic thing we need to do is just to show us how to display something on the screen. This print statement is used to display an output. That is just the basic function of print statement. And let's just display our common hello world. So let's use something like this. Hello guys. This is just to display, this is just to print out this. As simple as that. Python is a very user friendly uh, language, and it's very simple to understand. Now to run your Python file, let me reduce this screen so that I will show you. To run your Python file in your VS Code, this button here is run. You can run it from here. You can decide to run it from this place. You can run it from here. Here now you can choose to run with debug, or you can choose to run without debug. And running with debug is you are checking errors while running the code, fixing the errors while running the code. You can also use your shortcut F5 to run and Control F5 to run too, or very simply click on this icon here. Remember, if you have not installed a debugger, this icon, this play icon here is not going to appear on your VS Code. If you have not installed a Python debugger, it will not appear. So in case you don't have it, that is why you don't have it. So I'm going to run it from this place, and here is the terminal where our project is going to be displayed. So, and we are having our output here. And again, let's talk about the basic syntax. Is syntax itself mean a set of rules, that governs how a particular function or code is going to be displayed, is going to be written, how you are going to write your code. The syntax of this is that a variable must have a variable name. This is a variable name, so we can call this a variable name. We have the name of the variable. That is something that must occur if you want to write a variable. Then the equality sign. That equality sign is called an assignment operator. It's called an assignment operator when in assigning a variable. Then we now have the value of that variable. So this is the basic syntax on how to write a variable. We are using this thing to illustrate what it means by syntaxes. By syntaxes. So this is the rules, set of rules that governs how a particular code is going to be written. Now, notes. When your Python code is being run, the code is being run line by line. It's run line by line, not running it generally. And running the line by line means that the first line we first run, the second one run, the third one run, and so on. And that is how it is being run. And what the thing that is in charge of running that code line by line is called the interpreter. So, and all of us should know what interpreter is. Meanwhile, the whole of the code is going to be run together, checking errors, and it is done by the compiler. The compiler's function is to walk the whole code through and check if there is error. Is an interpreter that will tell us that there is an error. For example, we did something here. We remove this bracket that is here. We already see an error. Interpreter shows an error immediately. Shows an error immediately if we have. And look at the problem tab here, is already showing us two errors because we have an error in our code, which means the interpreter shows us, indicates the error immediately, and show us what the error is. But compiler does not indicate that error immediately. Rather, when you run the code, it indicates its error from the terminal when the code is being run to check, oh, there is an error in your code. So that is the thing that you should know about interpreter and the compiler. Then the next thing is that let's talk about commenting. Yes, let's talk about commenting. In Python, commenting simply means putting down a, a particular line of code, and they are going to be ignored by the Python when running the code. Like, if a particular line is being commented on, that line is not going to be run when you run the code. The essence of the essence of commenting is to ensure descriptive, in fact, it's just for the description of code. That is why commenting is very good, and as a good programmer you need to use commenting very very well, because it is very very efficient and important that you use commenting. It allows another person to read your code and understand what your code is all about, and it also describes what you are doing while doing it. So then, how to get your comments if you want to comment on a particular code. For example, this particular code is give us this result, hello guys. So if we comment on this particular line now, it simply means that this line is not going to be printed again. It's not going to show us any result again. And how do we comment on the line here? We use our pound symbol. What is it called? Pound symbol. This pound symbol. Okay, this ash. Now ash symbol now. My this thing is okay. Okay. Use the ash symbol at the front of the line of the code. With this none, with this none, this particular line has been ignored, and if I run the code, I'll be having nothing in my terminal because nothing is being displayed anymore. So we have a multi-line and we have a single line commenting. This particular one that we did here now is called the single line commenting. It's called the single line commenting. But if you want to have a multi-line commenting, we introduce what is it called? Quotation mark, single quotes, single quotation like this now. Three this side, three this side. At the center becomes, you can write your code here, and any code that you write here is not going to be interpreted. It's going to be seen as it's a comment. For example, if we take this, if we comment this at the front of this code, we will see that the whole of this line now has been disabled, which means this particular line of code now has been commented. And look at the color changes are not the same. The single line commenting is different from the multi-line commenting, which means in some cases multi-line commenting, if you use this to comment on your multi-line, there might be some code that will be interpreted, but it is not a Python, it's not going to be interpreted as Python code. For example, you are working on database and you use multi-line commenting. Database, if you want to add SQLite to this particular Python program that you are writing, you will include them in this docstring. That time is going to be called docstring instead of multi-line commenting. But normally in Python, you use this as a multi-line commenting stuff. Then another way you can comment on your code, you don't want to do all these things. Very easy way to do it. Select the line of code that you want to comment. Just make your cursor blink at that line. Once it's blinking at that line, you use a shortcut to comment, and that is control slash control slash. I think it should be control slash button. This slash here, if you if you type if you press this in your keyboard, you are going to comment on a particular line that the cursor is blinking on. Then if you want to comment all, select all of them and still do the same thing, and everything will be commented at the same time, so you don't have to start doing it one after the other. That is if you have a portion of code that you want to disable, that is when you do that. The same way you can undo it again by using the control plus slash to do it. So that is all we'll talk about in commenting. Now another thing that you should know is area of what is it called, tab. Is it tab? Okay, now area of indentation. So in the indentation, we already know how to indent in our from our keyboard, which is pressing our tab key to move the cursor. Indentation is very necessary when you are writing a Python code, because in every block of code, indentation is very necessary. If you have any error in your indentation, you are going to have error in the whole of your program. Just indentation error is going to make your program not run. For example, let me use something to illustrate what indentation is. Let me say name here, let's say CS is equal to 200 level. For example, we want to perform a simple logic here. Let's say if CSC is equal to, okay, equal to 200 level, print CSC. Okay, this is an example of indentation. Look at the indentation here, and in the indentation from your keyboard is just a space. 4 space later, press your space bar 4 times. Look at this dot that we're having here. It's just a kind of showing us that it is a 4 space gap that you have here. That is in case you make a mistake and you want to manually indent, you use 4 space, or you hit your tab button once. But in this case, it is the Python already understands that we want to indent with this colon here. Once you introduce a colon in a particular line and you hit enter to go to the next line, it will automatically indent that line, assuming that the that line belongs to this particular one. So what is the importance of indentation? Indentation is just used to get uh, just to indicate block of code. Yeah, to get a block of code, a code that belongs to another one. That is a code inside another one. It simply means that this particular thing now is inside another one. If we should print this program, if we should run this program and we say if CSC is equal to 200 level, print CSC. So let's run it and see what we have. Now we have our result here as 200 level, and CSC is equal to 200 level. That is from the idea of our variable. So CSC is equal to 200 level, and that is why we printed this here. So I hope that we are following. I hope we are following. Please, can I get a reaction from anybody? Let me know if we are following. Any
Yes,
reaction from anybody?
hello, sir.
Okay.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So that number two has hashtag control slash.
We
What's
are
this one?
following.
Okay, the control slash, I use it to illustrate something. I use it to illustrate something. When I said if you want to comment on any line of code, for example, you want to comment on this one, and you don't want to come and start looking for this hash symbol or pound symbol here, just make sure that your cursor is selected, is in that line of code. Then you press control plus slash on your keyboard. Then you automatically uh, comment on that line of code. If you do it again the second time, it will uncomment. That it will like it will undo. So that is what the
Okay.
this is for. And remember that it's not just one line of code. You can actually select all the code that you have and you do the same thing. That is how to comment once instead of going line by line to comment.
Okay.
Is
Thank
that
you.
taking?
It's okay.
Okay. Now the next thing we are going to talk about now is we've talked about the basic syntax, we talked about the indentation, and we talked about the commenting. So the next thing now is let's talk about variables. Remember that what we are doing, we might not, as we are doing it, we will be seeing more things. We'll be seeing more things that we are supposed to know. Even the one that we might jump in this process, we might remember it in another process. So we already have variable here, and we already know the syntax of how variable is being written. The syntax is that it starts with a variable name and you introduce your assignment operator, then the value of the variable. That is variables. Okay, now let's talk about the variable it's properly as its own topic. We use this to illustrate something. A variable is a kind of storage or a container where you can store something. Is a container where you can store something. For example, here CSC is the variable name, and this particular name now is a container, and we stored this value 200 level to it. So which means now when we try to access this 200 level, what we had to do is to print out CSC. Just print out the container. When you say once you call the container, everything that is stored in this container is going to be executed. So if you have a long text here, it's going to be executed, and variable can be renamed and variable can be modified. As the name sounds, variable, it can vary. It can vary. It can vary. You can change the value of a variable after creating it. And remember, the one you first create is the main, is the first one. If you create a second one with the same name, automatically it is going to take that second one as the current variable. For example, we have a variable. Okay, let's say we have a variable called, let's say, code, and we give a code a value of 20. Now if we say, if we want to print out this code, okay, let's say we print this code and we now come again and say code. we have variable now called code, and we now give it another name, this. Let's also print it out. We have something. Okay, now this is the first one, this is the second one. Let's comment on this line so that we will just be working on this particular one here. You can key your terminal from this place. Killing a terminal is just to cancel everything that has been run in the terminal. Here you can just hide the panel if you want to hide it, but you have not cleared anything from there. But here, let me kill the terminal so that we just run this as a fresh code. Now, click on your run Python file here, and we have our result. So the result here is 200, okay, 20 and 30. Okay, so which means the first value was 20 and we printed it out. The second value now is 30, so that 30 now is now seen as the current value. Let's comment on this one and see what we have here. Now you see we are having 30 here as the name, as the value printed for code. So which means this particular one now has been ignored since another one is already taking over. That is what happens there. This one now will be ignored. That's why I told you that Python interprets the code line by line. The first line is being interpreted before going to the second line. So that is variable. Now there are naming rules when you are writing a variable. There's what we call what is called reserved words. Reserved words. Reserved words are those words that are already recognized by Python and they are not going to be used as a variable name. You cannot use them as a variable name. For example, we have something like this, true. We cannot say true is equal to something because true is a reserved word. As you are seeing it now, you know the color of the text is already different from this one because it's already a different thing that we should know. So we cannot use something like this to name a variable or something like class because we have something like called class as a Python language. You cannot use something like def as a variable name. So these are the reserved words. Something like and, you can't use and because and is an operator. You can't use something like is. So all these things are many more. There are so many. There are so many reserved words, and they are not going to be used while writing while writing a variable. So it is very necessary that you should know some of these things. All this is instance. They are reserved words. Look at all this thing that is coming out here. You can use something like is instance here now as a variable name because those words are already reserved for Python. They are already recognized by Python and they are used to write code. Okay, now another rule that governs the variables is that a variable cannot start with a number. A variable name cannot start with a number. For example, here we cannot start here with two. With two, we can't start with two. We can't start with one because it's against the rule of naming a variable. It must not start with number. And if you have multiple names to write as a variable name, for example, we want to create something and we say we want to write username and we want to separate the two like username. This thing now is correct. We can Say username is CSC. Okay, username is CSC here. We can decide to separate this like this if we want to do it, but we are having an error. So if you want to do this something like this, in this place introduce an underscore. This is called camel case type, camel case of how to write a variable. It's called camel in Python. I think in every programming language it's called camel casing. So where you can get this underscore the other word. And if you are naming your variable, make sure that what you are naming that variable, the name is similar or is something that can describe what that variable is carrying as its value. No spaces is allowed. No spaces is allowed to be introduced in between a variable name. For example, we have a username. So we cannot have something like this. We cannot have a space in between here. We can either close it together or we can use underscore to separate them. So it is advised you use underscore to separate them. Then we also have another way. Camel. We have camel and the horse and the horse case. The horse case is where this will start from here. You get to this point, you introduce a capital letter to just to differentiate them. But it is not advisable you use this particular method in writing a variable, since this particular method has been recommended for writing a function. When we get to function, you will see how to write a function. So as you creating a variable, make sure you use something that is descriptive and use underscore. So mm, do we have other rules? Okay, another rule is that when creating a variable must not contain any special character other from underscore. It's either you have underscore or you don't have any special character. For example, I cannot introduce full stop here. I can't introduce full stop there. I'm already having an error. I can't introduce full stop at the center of this. Hmm? A variable must not have anything, any special character. I can't introduce full stop. I can't introduce any special character at all inside this list. So uh, access the value of a variable you want to display it is simple as we print it out. And look at the syntax of printing. The syntax of printing is that your print statement it must start with your print statement and you must open a bracket. You must open a bracket after the print statement. Your bracket must be opened. Then if it is a variable, then you can write the variable inside with the variable name inside what you want to print out. If it is a text that you just want to print, just like what we did here in this hello world, you just want to print a text, it's just a text, you can enclose it with quotation, either single quotation or a double quotation. So just print it out. That's how you can access the value of the variable here. So let us talk about the types of data that you can have in your variable. And that brings us to the next thing that we are supposed to do, which is called the data types. So data types, um, there are Different data types that we are going to talk about in Python. Remember, in other languages, there are languages that gives a different name to those data type, but in Python, what we have are the the integers, the integer, and it is written short as int. Then we have the float. Okay, let's say the string first, and it is written short as str like this. Then we have the float. Our float is also written as float. Float is written as float. It doesn't have any short way of writing it again. Then we have another one called a boolean, and the boolean is written as bool in short. So there are so many data types, but these are the major ones that are going to talk about. In Python, the integers, we know what the integers are, and the integers are just numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are integers. Why are they called integer? Okay, they are integers just because they are numbers that does not have a decimal point. Any whole number is an integer. That's just the thing. Any whole number is an integer. For example, this 23 here is a whole number and it is an integer. If this number is something like 2.0, I know this is supposed to be a whole number, because if you remove point 0, you're already having, it's not uh it's just 2. But this is not called an integer. This is a different data type, and it is called a float. A float. So once there is point, decimal point in any number, that number changes its type from integer to a float. So let's give an example of a float. Something like 0.1 is a float. 2.0 is a float. Any number that has a decimal point in Python, it is called a float. I know in some other languages, there are languages that call it a double. Yes, but in Python, it is called a float. Just take note. Then we have the remember that this number can either be negative, they can be positive. For example, here, if we have here as minus minus 3, minus 3 is an integer, but 3 point something is not an integer. Then float minus, it can also have a minus as long as this number is containing decimal point, it is a float. As long as this number is not containing decimal point, it is an integer. Then let's talk about the string. String are simply character type of data. Data that, okay, let's say data that are basically text. They are basically text. For example, something that we have here, this thing that we have here is a string. And how do we know that this is a string? This thing is going to have a quotation. It's going to have a quotation here. So anything that is written inside this quotation becomes a string value. Whether it is a number, whether it is a reserved word, whether it is a boolean figure, whether it is anything at all. As long as this thing is enclosed inside a quotation, it is a string. And it must not be one quotation, it must not be single quotation or double quotation. You can use either single quotation or you can use a double quotation. So if I have something like computer here, this computer is a string value. because it is enclosed in a quotation. You can also have it here. Let's say it can be a single or a double quotation something. So if we have 300, remember this is a number, but it's already inside a quotation. A number, it is now a string value. So the summary of what string is that it must be enclosed inside a quotation, either single quotation or double quotation. Let's talk about the boolean, shortly written as bool. So boolean is just a number that has two options. It mustn't be a number, just a data type that are meant to have just two options. Either this thing exists or this, or just so let's have another example of boolean. A boolean value, we said it must be either a yes value or a no value. For example, you are creating a game software or app, and you must have to get somebody feeded. Let me say the robot that is running around need to reload when it's hungry. So we can just set a value in a variable called um okay, hungry. Let's use hungry. We're just using something randomly. Hungry, yes. You can use true. Hungry, true. So if we are writing code, we might try to say hungry is equal to true, or we can say hungry is equal to false. So that as we are writing, we'll now say, okay, we might decide to say once the hungry is no longer false, because hungry is equal to false means that it is reloaded, it is loaded well. So we might try to write a code a program that will say once the hungry is no longer false, please reload. So which means we either have a false value, is either you are hungry or you are not hungry. Remember what we did here is just a illustration. You can use anything else to do it. So if you want to print this in the out, you can just access them by printing print name, print age, print height, print hungry, and we see all these results in our terminal. So we don't have to print all of them out. These are just a basic part of this project. Okay. Okay, we've talked about how to reassign a value to a variable, where we assigned something to a value to this code, and we reassigned another value to it. So that is for that one. Okay, this class is not going to be a long one. Yes, it's not going to be a long one because It's just a kind of introduction. Then we've talked about the basic syntaxes, we talked about the data types, we talked about the variables. So let's still talk more on the variables, because can a variable have more than one value? The truth the truth is, let's see. I'll show you another way of assigning many values to different variables in one line. And you can start to do all these things in one line and say name, let's say comma, age, comma, height, comma, let's say hungry. Okay. Now we will now start assigning those values to it. You can call this one, just note that the sequence with which you assign these values is the sequence with which the variable is going to assign those things to it. For example, we have all these spaces does not matter. All this space here now doesn't matter if you're assigning a variable. This means that name is this, age is this, height is this, hungry is this. So it will just take the first index, this is called the first index, and assign it to the value that you give to the first value that you give, and that is the same. These two code now are going to run the same. Are going to run. Are going to produce the same result. So if we and we can actually print only this. We can actually work on print only one here if we want to do it. For example, we can just say print name. Okay, we can just say print name, and we already have. Okay, we don't have something name here. We have name here. We just want to print only name, and we run the code. We see only the name printed at our terminal here. If you want to print another thing, you can also say print age. You can also add age there, and you can also print two of them. Look at them. We have this and we have this. So you can print all this. You can assign your variable to variables in one line, and you can still get it done. Now, what if we have two names? We want to give that names to a particular variable. Now, let's say we have x as a variable, and we say x. Let's say x is equal to 0. Okay, let's say x is equal to 5, and we have another variable called y, and it is equal to 6, or let me say 10. Okay, if we have these two variables now, and let's say y is also equal to 5, we can decide to write this like this: x equal to y equal to 5. This now, we have rewritten it in this form. Now, this thing that you see here now, if I should print y, I'll be having 5. Then if I also print x, I will also be having 5. Let's run the code. Kill our terminal, run from fresh. Okay, let me make this more visible. Now look at what we are having here. We're having 5, 5. So we now have multiple names for one variable. So these are the ways you can assign a variable. You can either assign them in one line, you can do it like this in case you have something. This particular way now is not advisable for you to use it unless it is needed. Unless it is needed. Yeah. Unless it is needed that you should do it that way. Maybe you have a particular value. Let me say this particular thing now is you are creating a password. You are creating a password and you want you want Mr. X to access this same password. You want Y to access this same password. You can start to say, okay, if Y come, he should be able to access this password. If X come, he should be able to access this password. So in password system, in a very strong password system, you can apply this kind of logic in writing the code. But it's not advisable that you should do it. But if it is necessary, you can do it. So that is what we have to do about the variables and how you can assign the values to the variable. Okay, let's do some other thing. Let's try to modify a variable. How what is modifying a variable is changing the value of the variable or adding something to it or removing something from it. For example, we have x is equal to 5 here. We can now decide to say that this same x should be should be equals to, let's do something like this. Is it plus equal to abi equal to plus? Let's move this to this side. Okay. Um let's now print x. Let's know if we have been able to change the value of the x here. Now we can see we now have 6 as the value of x here, but y is no longer y keep on remain y remain the 5. We can also do it print two things here. Okay, we've done that before. So these are how this one now is a kind of modifying the value of a variable. We incremented it by 1. This particular thing now simply means increase x by 1. You can increase x by 2 by changing it. Then we can also do minus here. Like assuming we introduce minus here, we are removing 1 from the previous value of a variable. So when we talk about the operators, we will know more, we will do more on this variable and the operators. Do we have operators in the scheme that we are using? We don't have operator, but by tomorrow we are going to include operators, uh, and we are going to do control flow, control structures tomorrow. We'll do control structure and operators tomorrow. So do if we have any question based on what we did today and you want to ask a question, this is the time for the question. So the floor is open. If you have a question, you can go ahead and ask your question. Do anybody have question?
No question.
Okay. So if we have gotten what we did today, I know that today's class is a kind of a reminder. All of us are used to this particular thing that we did today, but it is from this basics that we can get grounded while we do the more complex things. So by tomorrow we'll be doing more complex things based on what based on the scheme that we have. Though it's not that more complex, but it's something that we should do, and is more advanced than what we did today. Today we just talked about the syntaxes. We show how to create variables, indentation, the importance of indentation, the data types, and modifying a variable and all and others. So if we don't have a question, I think we'll be ending this session here today, and by tomorrow we are going to continue from this point. So do anybody have something to say about the class?
I really enjoyed the class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, thank
Okay. Um, okay, course rep, please, if you are still online with us, I will
Um,
need your permission to end the class.
you can end the class.
Guys, see you guys tomorrow. We hope for more turnout tomorrow.